I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Retention as a Service agency, Electriq. And today I'm joined by John Snow, founder of the Snow Agency, and just a couple blocks away from us down here in Miami. Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Brandon.
So before we dive into some of the topics we want to cover today, can you give everybody just a quick background on yourself and how you've gotten to this point?
Yeah, sure. It's a pretty extensive background, but I'll try to keep it short and sweet. So I've been in the e-com space for over 10 years now. Got started on the influencer and affiliate side. Built an affiliate marketing platform with my brother, Dan, who's been my partner for the past 10 plus years. We essentially got all the largest pages on organic social media, which was, mostly influencers, celebrities, athletes, or other publishers, got them on our platform, and we ran affiliate offers through our platform and onto those organic pages. And we drove 9 figures in revenue through the platform in under 2 years of launching it. From there, we ended up launching a Shopify holding company where we launched, scaled, and ultimately exited 9 brands. We were doing everything in-house. At first we started with leveraging our influencer network. From there, that's where we got into paid media, retention marketing. We were doing all the fulfillment in-house. Everything A to Z was kept internal for all of our brands. Each of those brands was 7 or 8 figures in annual run rate. And that actually served as the foundation for us becoming a performance marketing agency, which is now known as the Snow Agency. So we've been a full service agency for over 4 years now. Really everything from paid social, paid search, to retention marketing, SEO, creative, influencer, web design, and dev. And recently we've gotten into PR as well through the acquisition we've been a part of in the past few months.
Awesome. Well, yeah, extensive would be one way to describe it.
I didn't even get into my dental background. That's another story.
I know. I was hoping you touched on that. Let's quickly touch on that because, that's one thing that I'm super interested in is like, how the hell did you go from dentistry to e-commerce?
Yeah. So I was a general dentist in the Air Force about 10 years ago. And that's how I essentially fell into the influencer marketing. So I was stationed in Louisiana, in the middle of nowhere, not New Orleans, Louisiana, it was Shreveport, Louisiana, which is northwest Louisiana on the border of Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So by nature, there's absolutely nothing to do there. And so that's when my brother Dan was actually building large social media pages. He was ironically studying to go to dental school. He was already accepted into dental school. And then his Instagram page started growing a lot. It's @Rap on Instagram. You might know them, over 10 million followers. And so he had the idea. He's like, hey, I realize a lot of these other big pages on social are not monetizing their pages like they should be. Let's build this platform and essentially get all these large pages on the platform, and we can help them monetize it. So I had a ton of free time. The days would, start at 7 a.m. and end at 3 p.m. when I was doing dentistry for the Air Force. So I would get home with nothing to do, and I was like, sure, I'll do it. Really started as a hobby to pass the time and turned it into something really successful. And then that was just, once we started getting momentum, it was hard to ever come out of the e-com side. Finished up my 3-year commitment with the Air Force, and my lifelong dream, the reason why I went to dental school was actually to become an orthodontist. So I wasn't ready to give up my dental career just from seeing, flash in the pan success on social. Didn't know if this could be sustained. And so, I got accepted to my orthodontic residency, moved back up to the Northeast where I'm from, had my residency in New York City. And, from there, the e-commerce success continued. I was juggling both careers for another 3 years. And then, ironically, I was actually under contract to buy an orthodontic practice at the end of my residency. And that week is when COVID hit. So we all know what happened when COVID hit. So I pulled out of that deal because everything literally shut down in New York City. It was all shut down. That's when the agency started really taking off and growing. And so by the time things ended up opening back up in New York City, the orthodontic practice I was under contract to buy didn't return to the level it was producing before. COVID. And so I decided to totally pull out of that deal. And the agency, honestly, at that point had already doubled in growth over the course of like those 6 months while everything was pretty much shut down for COVID. There really wasn't enough time to go back to dentistry. So I had to choose. It was either, be an entrepreneur on the dentistry side and run a practice or a network of practices, or, continue building and operating my agency. So that was kind of how I stepped away from dentistry. It's funny how COVID totally changes lives, but that's the dental side in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, I mean, the timing there worked out pretty well. If it was even 2 weeks later, then you would have had that orthodontic practice right before COVID hit, which would not have been ideal.
A very expensive loan with zero revenue tied to it. It would just be totally lost asset essentially. So it's funny how I guess I prayed well that week. Ironically, the deal should have closed right before COVID, but the lawyer on the seller's side, he actually was on a Greek vacation, like a Greek island vacation on a boat for like 2 weeks, and he didn't even have service, so it got delayed. And so that was to my advantage.
Well, blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
Well, what's it been like? You've obviously taken the fast track through entrepreneurship, and you just, sort of capped it off with a nice exit as well. What was that process like for you? Because it was really happened over the course of, let's say, like 3 years, right? I mean, COVID to now is 3 years, and you all grew super quickly. So sort of how did you manage and handle that growth? And did you know exiting was something that, was that a goal? Like some founders I talked to, they're like, yes, I started this business to like exit it, and others sort of just fall into it. Where do you sort of fall in that camp?
Yeah, it's a great question. Whenever Dan and I started any business, the end goal really is to exit. And it really comes down to at what point do we want to exit. But when it comes down to the agency side, we weren't thinking we were going to be exiting within 3 years. We were kind of setting it up long term. We were actually making a ton of investments into growth. Ironically, the year before selling, which anyone would tell you not to do, we ended up, finding the right partnership where even though we weren't totally ready to shift in ownership, the right partnership came along where it was an absolute no-brainer. It was a synergistic partnership, and I'm still heavily involved in the business. Obviously, that's my full-time day-to-day is still being in the agency. And we're really building out kind of like a big agency roll-up model of synergistic capabilities and trying to build like a holistic strategy to marketing. And there's no way that I would be able to do that alone. So having seasoned partners that can really offset a lot of the other administrative day-to-day, the legal, the finance, the operations, and then making sure the client work is excellent. And the client services is a great experience. Handling all that while hiring and building out new service offerings, it's not even a possible endeavor really. And we kind of realized that. So it's perfect timing. And so it was a no-brainer at that point.
Can you talk a little bit more about what that sort of joined entity looks like and what you're most excited about? Because that was one thing that I always debated with Electriq when we got to like the 45 people mark is, do we try and like get bigger ourselves, or do we just like stay the same size? Because we can't do everything, I think, at that size. Like you can't do, like you mentioned, you added on PR and whatnot. And so like, how are you thinking about taking to market these synergies that you now have as a part of this larger entity?
Yeah, it's a great question too. First, I'll start off with kind of the model, right? So the guy that actually started Avenue Z, which is now the holding company of what Snow Agency is a part of. So he's a big agency guy. He's been in the space for over 20 years. He was the founder of iCrossing. His name is Jeff Herzog. iCrossing was one of the largest independent agencies at the time when he actually exited that business to Hearst Magazine. And then he started another agency years after that called Zog Digital, which then exited to Investis Digital. And so he had done it on the biggest scale. He had a global company with thousands of employees and had the vision for what a modern day agency should look like. And he'd really been on the sidelines for a few years. And once he had the thesis and pitched it to us, we realized that that's exactly kind of what we had already envisioned. And we just didn't know how to get to that point. Didn't really even have, honestly, the internal resources or finances. I mean, we were totally bootstrapped as an agency. And so he came in with a solution to everything. And we had an aligned vision on what that agency does look like. And what we have identified is that when you're an agency in a silo, if you're like a Facebook ads agency, or maybe you also have Google and you have, a few other execution service lines, but you don't have the overarching strategy to solve a business's true needs, or even the ability to identify where those issues are and provide a holistic one-stop solution for it. That was kind of like our vision here. So it's the PR component, that's where you create the narrative, which we didn't have any PR in-house at the time. So it's really the intersection of PR and then amplification through paid media. So I've always said PR is only as effective as the number of people that see that earned media placement, right? So you have the best story in the world, but if 100 people see that placement on Forbes or Bloomberg or whatever the publisher is, then it's not going to drive impact. So how do we have that convergence of the creating those influential narratives, getting the placements, but then scaling them out so the right people see them at the right time? And that's where the paid media side and what we were truly great at kind of converged with PR. So that's what we're bringing, kind of like a strategic consultancy approach with all the solutions to a business's problems that they might have.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because I've worked with countless brands in the past where I'm like, you've got far bigger issues than like email and SMS marketing to like improve your retention. Like you need far more, but like, how do you actually package that into a service offering so that you're charging fairly for the value that you're putting into it, but then the brand is also able to get the value out of it? Because that's always been my like hesitancy with full service agencies. Like if you start to add up all these little pieces together, you start looking at a very hefty like monthly bill, and then you narrow yourself into a smaller sort of target audience in terms of brands that you can service. So are you experiencing sort of like a shift in the types of brands that you want to work with or are working with? Because like we had to go through that where we had to sort of shed a whole lot of business as we started to mature and scale up.
Yeah, absolutely. When we were first an agency, we would take on pretty much any client that would pay our retainers, which is probably a reason why we were able to grow so fast. But when you realize over time, and you have so many different service models internally, if you have clients that are, a tier one client where they might be using you for every service, they're at, 9-figure run rate, you can't be giving them the same level of service as you do a brand that's using you for a small Facebook ad retainer, and maybe they're doing like $1 million a year in revenue, right? So as you grow, you realize those models aren't really, you have to develop like several different service models internally, and that's really hard to scale on. When it comes down to where we're at currently, we're definitely more upmarket than we are now. It makes no sense for us to work with a brand that's under 7 figures a year in revenue. Absolutely, that's like a non-starter, unless they're a well-funded brand that's pre-launch and they have the finances to invest and derive the value of our services. When it comes to like the profile of the client, Snow Agency has always been really entrenched in the D2C space. So like 95% of our clients were Shopify brands in a variety of verticals. Really, the strategy is mostly the same, regardless if it's a fashion brand, a VMS brand, a beauty brand, whatever it might be. But now, after the acquisition, the PR agency that we've acquired, most of their clients are actually larger, like Series A and up businesses, not in the direct-to-consumer space. So it's actually mostly in the tech space. So fintech, health tech, frontier tech, those are most of their client profiles. But what they realize is a lot of their clients need the amplification, and they needed the social media components, which the PR agency couldn't deliver on. Maybe they would refer out to an external agency to handle the execution of that, but not having the integrated strategy to actually come up with a great PR brief that included the PR or the performance side of it, up front. And so maybe they got an earned media placement that won't actually lead to new business for their clients. So having that in-house now, having their client profile, that's, in addition to D2C. And then the SEO agency that we acquired is actually more enterprise. So AAA, Orlando Magic, Universal Studios, businesses like that. Also not really in the direct-to-consumer e-commerce space. So now we have like this amalgamation of many different client profiles, and they all have the same needs. And really it's 90% of the same strategies, whether it's lead gen, purchasing a product or signing up for a service, really comes down to the same core principles. So,
yeah. And how are you thinking about sort of meshing those two different entities all together? Because I'm like a firm believer in, buying versus building. Like, can you imagine if you had to go out and like build your own PR arm or build your own SEO department? Like, I don't think it works as well, because I really think you need like founder involvement in those entities that are coming in, because that's where you get into issues with like quality control, in my opinion, is if you just sort of start throwing people into the mix in new channels that, it's not their business, so it's not the same. Like, they're not paying the level of attention or detail to it that you really need in order to have like a thriving organization. But how are you dealing with merging all these various processes? And like, I'm sure everybody had a different way they put together client decks and have a different way for project management solutions. How are you tackling that?
Yeah, you brought up a great point in the beginning, like buying or building. And that's something we were, when we were totally bootstrapped as the Snow agency pre-acquisition, we were obviously just building everything internally. And that takes a long time, a lot of trial and error. It's finding, the leader of that discipline you're trying to build internally. And that's, a very difficult endeavor, is to find talent that is fully bought in and almost sees themselves as a CEO of their service line. And that's where buying really comes in. So like acquiring PR, acquiring SEO, where, like the SEO company we acquired has been in business for 15 plus years. So, I mean, these are true experts at their craft. For us starting SEO internally, it might be already difficult to find someone, but someone with 15 plus years of experience and has been through it all over 2 decades, almost impossible to find. And founder involvement, totally, like each of the businesses we've acquired since the acquisition, founder involvement is critical. And that would be like a non-starter, essentially. If it was just an exit, just, dump a business into us, it's not how it works. So, we're pretty much fully integrated, I would say, with both of those businesses, faster than I imagined. Obviously, with any integration, with different cultures, different services, different operations, different communication styles, different meeting cadences, and syncing all that, obviously will have its challenges, but it's been much smoother than I expected, really, because our new CEO, Jeff Herzog, and his leadership team he brought along with him, his COO, CTO, CFO, they've been through many acquisitions and integrations in the past. So they've already brought those learnings internally, and it's been a much smoother process than I realized.
I'm sure having everybody be in their own sort of swim lanes helps as well, too. It's not like you're merging together 2 email and SMS agencies. Exactly. And then there's like, there's some inefficiencies, and maybe there's some people that don't need to be there anymore because there's overlap and stuff like that. So you get to avoid all that.
Yeah, we want to avoid redundancy in any acquisition, and the same holds true moving forward. I think the most important like core principle and like value that's really been emphasized across the board has been like flexibility and open-mindedness, right? So like everyone's gonna been used to selling from the same deck, or using a certain task management software, whether it be ClickUp, Teamwork, Asana, whatever it is. They might be using Salesforce or HubSpot. They might be using a DocuSign or Proposify or PandaDoc or whatever. So like everyone has to just have an open mind. That you're going to have to not everything's going to be your way, and really embrace that openly rather than complain. Like, be part of the solution, not the problem. That's huge. And I've been really happy to see that like the team internal, it's been really honestly easy because every team has been open-minded and flexible, and it's been a pleasure to see that.
So how do you stay focused on one thing? Because you obviously, like, based off your background, you've got a lot of different interests and you got your hands in different sort of buckets. And I can relate to that. And I feel like I have like 3 different businesses always running at once. How do you not only like choose which one you're really going to go all in on, but then be able to keep the focus sort of so intensely on that when there might be other like shiny objects that are flying around that could be worth your attention?
Yeah, so I've been much better recently than I was, 5+ years ago. So back when I was a dentist, orthodontist, owned numerous e-commerce brands. Then we were starting the agency. So we were really operating at least I was operating like 4 or 5 different entities. At one point, I think I had close to 10 LLCs active at the same time. But since I had and then I realized that, rather than spreading yourself thin and just having successful businesses across the board, it's impossible to ever build one of those into like what you truly think should be like your hallmark and what you're known for. And so realizing that, and that was honestly a moment of introspection that we had when we started the agency is, at one point we got to as many clients as we did brands that we owned. And then we're like, these are really competing interests. We truly can't be giving the brands all the attention they deserve. And we're going to minimize the value there. And then same thing on the client side. If, Dan and I are building an agency very early on, and we have to train new people and build new processes and have numerous clients in different verticals, we need to be fully on board there. And that's like a full-time job in itself. And so we had that realization. So we exited our brand. That's when I stepped away from dentistry back in June 2020 to really focus. That was like our core focus since then. I do some advising on the side and everything. It never penetrates like really my work time. I have a consulting call, during the day and everything. But I mean, when it comes down to being an entrepreneur, a successful one, there is no like 4-hour work week or any like, get rich quick schemes that you see on Twitter and propagate on LinkedIn and Instagram and TikTok. It doesn't exist. I'm like a relentless worker. And I think, business is part of my life. It's like business is my hobby. I actually enjoy doing business, and that's probably why I'm successful doing it. It's because I don't see it like work, and it really is like part of my lifestyle. It's like I'm always thinking about business. I mean, I do other things as well, but it's not like I'm a workaholic and I'm miserable and my life is falling apart. I still go to the gym 7 days a week. I still, go on hit the beach, Saturday and Sunday, Miami Beach in my backyard. I'm chilling on the beach with a beer. I go to my football Sundays. I'm in a sports bar. So it's like, I found that work-life balance, and really, honestly, a lot of my life is work, and I enjoy it. So it's really just like I think that's the cheat code, is really just have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, I like that perspective. It's a hobby, because it really is, I think, and that's a good way to explain it to others who maybe don't understand the fact, like, why the hell are you doing this? Like, or why are you working so much? It's like, well, it's not the same as maybe necessarily like clocking into a 9 to 5.
Yep. And I know you have the same mindset, because I see all the great thought leadership you put out there. Clearly you're consuming content as much as you're putting it out, if not more consumption. So you might be doing that instead of watching Netflix on the couch for 5 hours after work. So you get enjoyment out of that, keeping up to date on industry trends and, being at the forefront of that. And clearly it's part of your lifestyle too.
Yeah. My Wednesday evening of staying up to like 1 a.m. reading the additions report and then putting together my analysis. I was like, as I was going through it, I was like, some of the stuff is like, I feel like I'm kind of a nerd. Like I'm reading through it, I'm like, wow, like that's really cool. And I'm like having to Google some of the words that they put into the additions report. I was like, what the hell is this? Like, what is WebAssembly code? And then I went down this whole rabbit hole of like, it's faster than JavaScript, and they have this distributed network as well with all these edge nodes. And I'm like, this is like far more technical and nerdy than I was expecting to get on a Wednesday night at like 1 a.m. But exactly. It was fun.
Yep. And by the way, your analysis is on my reading list. I still got to get to it, but I did read additions, but I'd love to see what you had in mind about it.
Well, I think like the thing for me that makes it easier to like digest that much information is actually like less, like bells and whistles. And so when I go on that additions landing page, I'm like, holy shit, like where do I even start? There's so much going on. There's like, So I like to distill it into that PDF. And then once I just sort of go through each one and bring it over, that forces me to read through each item. And then I'll go back and like analyze each section, but like just the text. I don't need these like 3-minute, like flashy videos or whatever. Exactly. Like just give me the meat and potatoes or whatever the expression is. And then go from there. And I always like to think about it as, what does this mean for the next 6 months or the next year? Like what is missing from this report that like obviously should be coming based off of where they're putting investment at the moment. And it's crazy to think how much the platform has come since like I started the agency or since you started the agency. Even just yesterday, I was able to do something for like a drinks app client. It's not even an agency client. They like needed help with their theme. So I didn't even want to bother the developers. So like maybe I could do this. Because of Metafields and like the new online store editor, I was able to do it in like 5 minutes. That maybe a year ago would have taken at least a couple hours of a dev team time to do. And I just thought that was really cool just to see how much the platform has progressed.
Yeah. At this point, Shopify is like the no-brainer platform. I don't understand like how I know there's a ton of still like, $1 billion plus revenue brands that are like, on the Magentos and on the, Salesforce Commerce Cloud and WooCommerce. It's actually mind blowing how many are still in those like grandfathered platforms. Shopify, it's so easy to just build on now. Shopify app ecosystem. You see the Shopify executive team constantly shipping new updates. They're very forward thinking. Where these other platforms are stuck in the Stone Ages, and you need a whole dev team just to like maintain a website. One little website change or one little integration that you want to build, you literally have to build it from scratch. It's still mind blowing to me.
And I think part of it has to go back to your comment about, when you were looking at teams to potentially acquire, like having the mindset of being open to change. I think a lot of these legacy businesses are not, or they're almost disincentivized to push for change, because I hear it all the time as we've started to work with more enterprise businesses. Like I almost wonder, like, do the CEOs of these businesses actually know what their team members are saying on the calls that they have with third-party vendors? Because they're basically just like, we'd love to do this, but it'll probably take 6 months because like that's just the way it is here, and like I'm gonna go sign off at 4:00 now and just do nothing because there's
they're not incentivized to make any forward-thinking change.
Right. And that to me is like, that would be painful. And I think that's the biggest holdup. But with them offering commerce components, specifically with Shop Pay, like I think that could be a foot in the door for Shopify to like a Lululemon or to a Nike, where like I still don't get, I shop on some of these massive retailer websites and just awful checkout experience. Like, just throw Shop Pay on there. And then that makes all of the shop sort of products and the network effects and the whole ecosystem more powerful.
Their foot in the door,
yeah. And even if big commerce created those products, it doesn't matter because they don't have the network, they don't have the merchants, and they don't have the customers.
Exactly.
So, let's flip the table here, I guess, for a second, and have you be the interviewer for a moment. Are there any burning questions that you have on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first question is like, how do you split your time right now with the agency and drinks? Obviously they're two, I guess they are integrated, right? Like you're helping drinks clients, but I think there's a lot of your clients are not drinks clients and vice versa. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, so we brought on Elisa, who was formerly at Flowium, another Klaviyo lead agency. And so she's taken over the day-to-day of the agency operations, which has actually been a sort of a blessing in disguise, because I can now focus on doing the newsletter, doing more of the thought leadership. I have the time to spend digging into editions like that day versus, maybe I'll get to it eventually because I'm so like bogged down in client work. So that transition has been really, really successful and helpful. And we're also in the process of, unless it's a really like sort of, unless it's a Soylent style, Shopify Plus brand, we're solely focused on alcohol and enabling the alcohol category on Shopify. And we're the most uniquely sort of adept at doing so because of what Drinks brought to the table with their 30 plus years of beverage alcohol experience. I mean, I joke with most of our C-levels were in the workforce before I was even born. And that's sort of how the alcohol industry works. It's very much so a sort of an old school network. There are rules and regulations that are, it's the only product that's in the Constitution. So it just opens up this whole can of worms in a way that we at Electriq never really had to deal with. Like, you sell coffee on the internet, it's a lot different than selling liquor on the internet. Selling coffee, you make a mistake with sales tax, like maybe you get a little fine. You make a mistake with where you send hard liquor in the US, you go to jail. So it's just a different level. And Drinks had been working with Fortune 500 businesses, whereas Electriq was working with, mid-market Shopify Plus brands. So we've really been able to up-level I'm probably going to get shit for wearing this hat on this podcast, but like the up-leveling of the professionalism and the way that we work and interact with clients to the point where, it's been a great synergy. And part of the reason why I was asking you about how are you merging agency processes is because we didn't actually have to do that because Drinks didn't have an agency. So we just sort of, morphed together and it was additive. There was no overlap in any way whatsoever when it comes to processes. But I'd say my time is, say, maybe 20% agency, a lot more on just the overarching side of the business. And then Scaleless, I basically do in my air quotes free time. And that's where the hobby aspect comes into play, I would say. Like, this is why I'm doing it on a Saturday or a Sunday versus, trying to force everything into like an 8-hour window during the day.
Makes sense. I'd love to hear your story too.
So
how did you start the agency? I know you're a young guy. I mean, that's an anomaly in itself.
So I was going to the small school in Indiana to play basketball. And then I tore some ligaments in my ankle. It was going to take forever to recover. And I looked around and I don't want to be in a cornfield in Indiana. So I immediately withdrew. I was probably a month in to freshman year. Withdrew, moved to LA, took a gap year working while I, got the surgery and recovered and whatnot. And then went into business school at USC. Best part about business school at USC was that it was so, uninspiring that I was able to spend most of the time in class and also structure my schedule. So I was only in class Tuesday and Thursday so I could work Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I actually was working at Drinks during that time.
Oh, wow.
I left about a year into school to just start freelancing for really small businesses in the Shopify ecosystem. I'm talking like one person out of their garage style businesses, working for free or working for a couple $100 a month. Did that for about a year in between classes to get some reviews and case studies. And just fortunately was able to get revenue up to a point where about a month before graduation, I just had to, turn down the actual job offers, was able to hire a full-time team member who also was graduating with me for $45,000 a year or something. And it was just the two of us for a year in this dingy little office in Chinatown. Just learning a bunch. That was the most exciting time for me because everything's on YouTube, everything's on Google. I had no true experience. It was just, fake it till you make it, so to speak. And it was a grind those first 18 months because we didn't have any connections. We had no agency experience. I was writing handwritten letters, sending wine to the CEO of TRX and Bombas and all these other companies, businesses we had no actual business doing work with. But fortunately, a lot of them received it well and would chat with me. And that was an invaluable experience. But eventually it just all that work over the first 18 months. And it was just almost overnight, we went from 10 people to 45, it feels like, because of the foundation that was being laid as a part of that first 18 months. And we screwed up a bunch along the way too. And I actually am finishing up and we'll be publishing in probably a couple of weeks here. I've been writing a sort of a reflection on that process and journey. What would I have wanted to know going into it? If I put myself back in my shoes in 2018, 2019, these are all the things I'd want to know now, given all the mistakes that I made, whether it was not giving up control of bookkeeping quickly enough, as detailed and minutia as that, to more putting the wrong person into the right role for your business. And in this whole, you might be a great individual contributor, but you might not be a great manager. And if I would have just asked that team member, hey, do you even want to be a manager? They would have told me no. And they would still be a really strong individual contributor right now at Electriq. But I essentially thought, hey, everybody wants to, be a manager. Everybody wants to start their own business, but that's just not the reality. So there's just so much stuff that I learned and is going to be invaluable, I think, for whatever else I decide to do next. Because it's not like I had this undying love for marketing or wanted to, be an e-commerce agency guy. It was more about, I knew I wanted to have my own business, and agencies can be bootstrapped. You don't have to go out and raise money. So now I'm embarking on that next challenge, which is the venture funded business side of the world, which will be interesting.
Awesome. Yeah. And you bring up the individual contributor versus manager debate. That's the classic debate that I think is honestly misunderstood on both sides of the coin. It's really at the business level and the employee level. So I always equate it to, you don't want to take off your best player off the court. LeBron James, obviously the best player in the NBA in his prime, you want to take him off the court and make him the coach of the team. because he's the best contributor. No, it's like those are two parallel paths. And I think sometimes you have to identify that and call that out and let your employees know, hey, you could be paid better actually as being one of the best individual contributors out there rather than just like, being an administrator or a manager. It's not to say that you're not sufficient enough as a contributor if you're not right for the manager role. So then on the flip side, you could be an amazing manager and you could be a B- or C+ individual contributor. So it's really different qualities, different skill sets. And, it's very rare to find someone that's great at both.
Yeah, I think I'd be a terrible individual contributor. I get distracted too easily. I'd be like, and that's what the agency was to begin with. Like I was doing everything at like a 7 out of 10, but like I can't do web design and development. I can't do email. I can't do SMS. I can't do all these things under one roof. But one last question I have for you. Everybody, talks about AI. I feel like a lot of it's pretty gimmicky at this point. Are there any ways within your business right now that you're actually leveraging AI to be more efficient, whether it's in like, creative or copy development process, or what does that look like right now for you and how you're thinking about it moving forward?
Yeah, great question. So AI, like you said, it is almost getting to the point of being very gimmicky, and every business now is calling themselves an AI company when they shouldn't be. Much like, crypto and NFT, every e-commerce brand or business is trying to figure out how they could be a crypto company. And publicize that they're a crypto-based D2C brand just to increase the valuation, whatever. But AI is very exciting. Obviously, it has amazing use cases. So right now, internally, we're really using it as a tool, mostly for market research, copywriting, getting something from 0 to 80, and then the human takes it from 80 to 100. I think if you ever try to replace humans with AI totally, or put something in Chat GPT or some other generative AI and copy and paste that into your actual work without, giving it the extra TLC it needs, that's where the big mistakes happen. So we're really just using it as a research tool and a copywriting tool as a foundational piece, just so we can make things a little more efficient. Looking forward to seeing it kind of get introduced into creative. A lot of the creative AI tools, generative AI, are really not up to the standards that we have. But I think that's something that will get there in the next year. So hopefully that can be leveraged soon. Where I think I'm really excited for AI to take over is the actual media buying, budget optimization in the ad platforms, forecasting, saturation, cross-platform budget planning. A lot of that is actually all of it, I should say, should be objective based. It's really just statistics and machine learning based on data. And when should I increase my budget by 20% or drop it by 20%? The machines are better at running that equation than humans are. So I think that's where I'm actually most excited to see the industry go, is really with the objective parts of media buying, which is budget optimization, not just within a campaign or ad set, but within the whole platform, prospecting versus retargeting budget, Facebook versus TikTok versus Snapchat versus Pinterest. Where should my budgets actually be? So,
yeah, I still think there's still so many decisions made by us that should not be made by us, even with like email marketing, like segmentation. I don't know.
Exactly.
Like, this segment sounds good. Like we're personalizing it, but is this actually what we should be doing? Like Klaviyo, you have, basically all of Shopify using your platform. Why are you not telling us send this email to this person at this time?
Exactly.
That's where I think it should go, and we will be far more efficient and able to focus on other things. Like I don't think it's going to necessarily wipe out a ton of jobs. It'll just make us a lot more like impactful with the time that we do have.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Before we hop off here, can you just let everybody know who's listening where they can get in contact with you or Avenue Z?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm pretty active on Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find me there. And my email is john@thesnowagency.com if you want to chat more about any difficulties you might be having, or potentially work with Avenue Z as a client, or come work for Avenue Z. Those are the best places to find me: Twitter, LinkedIn, and email.
Awesome. Well, as always, everybody listening, this is Brandon Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or electriqmarketing.com, and we'll see you next time.